Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today to discuss characters again because we didn't have enough time last time. I think we just, like Susana said, we barely scratched the surface. So we have lots more to discuss on this one. So, Susana, start us off with an introduction, please.
Hello, my name is Susana Imaginário. I'm a writer, and I struggle to call myself a YouTuber, but I also run a YouTube channel called Den of the Weird, and I like to talk about books, stories.
And Paromita.
Hello, everyone. I'm a member of the Page Chewing Forum. I'm a general reader. I like to read in a variety of genres, and I like to discuss books.
And Jose.
Hi, I'm Jose. I run the Jose's Amazing Worlds YouTube channel, and I can also be found lurking around the Page Chewing forums.
And Jarrod. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me again. I'm Jarrod. I run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I write a blog here on pagechewing.com, on the Creative Crossroads blog, and I had a fun time doing that.
Yes.
And I'm sorry I missed last week. That sounded very interesting.
Well, we missed it too, so you didn't miss anything. It was actually 2 weeks ago, and we were just talking because Carl Diablo was here, and he pretty much kept us on track, which rarely happens. We usually get off on weird tangents, but we still managed to derail time to time. But Jose had an idea, so will you start us off?
Okay, so last time we talked about, so 2 weeks ago, we talked about what we liked about characters, and we talked about understanding character motivations and their backstories, or maybe a character's arc that made them interesting. And we talked a lot about Jaime Lannister, how he went from being an evil, sort of very unlikable character to having some sort of redemption or having some sort of inner journey that made it really interesting. We talked about things like that. We talked about relationships between characters and that sort of thing. But last week, when I was talking to Susana, I was thinking, well, some characters are actually cool just by themselves. And I'm thinking about maybe more traditional fantasy, but like Gandalf. As soon as he appears on the page, you go, that's a cool character, and you don't need his motivations, you don't need the backstory, you don't need anything. You go, that's a really cool character. And obviously, as the story moves along, he doesn't go through any... Well, he doesn't go through... He goes through some character arc, but it's not like on the same... It's not on par with Bilbo's... with Frodo's story arc or Bilbo's story arc. His is a bit more sort of subtle and so on. I go, well, what about characters that are just cool right off the page? Like how does that happen? And can anyone think of? So like my example is, I'm sorry, Susana, because we talked about it last week. I'm joining a new Call of Cthulhu role-playing game next week, and I had to create a character for the game, and I thought, what would be cool? And I just said, Bosnian sort of terrorist who migrates from, but basically an ex-French Foreign Legion Bosnian soldier who ends up in Cairo. And I thought, well, that's a cool character just in and of itself, an ex-Foreign Legion sort of, the battered old gruff bear sort of character. So have you guys encountered any cool characters off the page? And maybe if we just go sort of clockwise from me, so Susana?
Oh gosh, so many. I was laughing when you with Gandalf as an example. Yeah, he's pretty cool from the beginning. Just let the reader know that he's a wizard, and you're like, oh no, that makes him interesting. But it does go to quite an arc. With Gandalf the Grey, Gandalf the White, that was quite the progression. I guess his personality doesn't change much, to be fair. Let's see. Can I think about it No, I need time to collect my thoughts.
All right.
There's just too many.
We'll skip that stone, Jarrod.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, Gandalf is cool right off the bat because, like Susana said, it's mentioned he's a wizard, but he's also he also has this otherworldly origin that you see through the other characters' eyes, and so that gives him that sense of that aura of mystery and stuff like that, which makes him cool. And you mentioned making your character for Cthulhu, and but right off the bat, you gave that character this slight little history that's interesting, and he's like a soldier, a mercenary, so he already has all these assumed skills that you bring to the party, and that's the cool factor, I guess, that you would put into that. It's different than when you have a character that is a blank slate kind of character, where that character has to get built up through action or dialogue. So it all depends on how it's approached, I guess, through the writing.
So, like, off the page, you go Frodo, very bland, very
blank slate,
nothing particular. Gandalf, you go straight away. He can make color smoke rings in the shape of ships or whatever. So, I don't know. What do you think, Paromita? Any characters that right off the first paragraph you go, those are really interesting?
I'm not going to repeat Lord of the Rings. I was actually frantically looking at my shelves because my memory is not.
I'm going to
so
the books.
I thought of this character, William of Baskerville, who is one of the main characters in The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, which is historical fiction but murder mystery. And he is this luminescent personality right from the beginning. One of the reasons for this is this story is told from the perspective of his protege, Adso, who is training to be a monk and who is sort of doing an apprenticeship, or the abbey equivalent or the monastery equivalent of an apprenticeship with this personality, William of Baskerville. And in that age of where religious norms are quite strict, there is a lot of rigidity. Adso is mesmerized at the way William of Baskerville thinks. And because we are reading from Adso's perspective, so William of Baskerville stands out as this beacon of rationality, as this person who is going to solve whatever is about to happen. This very, very keen observationalist from the very beginning. And so, yes, that was a character that was mesmerizing. I would say Sherlock Holmes. Pretty much. A study in Scarlet is... Exactly. I didn't say Poirot because I think Christie imbues Poirot with a lot of personality traits to make him lovable and to make him very, very interesting to the reader. For example, he has to have all his eggs of the same size and they need to be symmetric and things like this. So she imbues Poirot with a lot of personality. But I would say that Sherlock Holmes and the William of Baskerville are two characters, which Susana correctly said that it's actually, it's modeled on that archetype. Right off the bat, I'm interested in them, and I have confidence that they know what they are doing, and it's going to be interesting to follow their journey.
And what about you, Steve? Any characters you can think of that just off the first page you go, that's interesting, that's one worth sort of following around?
Even though I'm not a big fan of the series, well, it's fine. I don't dislike it, but I think Logan Ninefingers comes to mind. Like, he just has that. He just seems cool. But I also wonder, because we talked about Frodo being a blank slate, does that? So I guess we can all agree that makes him less interesting because he is a blank slate. Do we? I guess if we have an idea of who a character is and we can apply certain traits to them on page one, whereas Frodo is like we have no idea really what his personality is or what his motivations are. So is that just because we like knowing who these characters are? We like knowing kind of what to expect, or is it more about the mystery of unfolding who a character like Frodo is?
Well, I think because a couple of weeks ago we talked about, the character journeys or all that sort of stuff. And I was thinking just like the opposite, like how did you get a reader to engage with a character from the very beginning? And from going around the table, the room, I was thinking whether are there any sort of archetypal characters that just because they are that archetype, you straight away engage with. So like Jarrod said, as soon as you have a wizard, that's cool. So it could be Harry Dresden. And Harry Dresden is cool just because he's a wizard, or Gandalf is. Because, then you've got the characters like in Realm of the Otherlings where you have to grow with them along off the page. They're not particularly interesting. But then, as I'm rambling here, Glotka in the first Lord trilogy, right off the page, you go, well, that's a cool character. And obviously, there's nothing cool about him. He's a cripple and he's this sort of jaded, cynical person. But all you need is 2 lines of dialogue, and you go, yeah. So I'm just wondering, what's that X factor that makes a character just pop off the page from the word go?
Intelligence, rationality. Just you sense that they have a wealth of knowledge, sense that they are intelligent.
So is Glotka another Gandalf, basically? Is it that archetypal sort of the sage?
No, I mean there's a opposite of Gandalf. I mean, not to spoil First Law too much, but I mean there's a personality who is basically the mage, and then the mage is, well, we think the mage is in control. I mean, Abercrombie very much plays with that expectation. Then it's like, oopsie. So I don't think Glokta is the for me personally was not in my reading, it was not the parallel to Gandalf.
Well, no, I was just going off what Susana said about being the rational, the intelligent one, the one that knows something that nobody else knows.
But is that knowing that it's Gandalf turned on its head? It's like Gandalf through a funhouse mirror. Is that why we find him entertaining? And all those characters, really, because it does subvert our expectations, and it's not what we expect to happen, but it's still funny. It's like a black humor. But is that why we like those characters so much? Because even though whether or not you like the series, I think most everyone can say the characters are at least interesting, whether you like the story or not. They're all memorable. But is that why we gravitate towards characters like that?
No, it's because they're wise. They know the world they're in. They understand the world they're in, I think. Wiser than
it's kind of like that.
Panther.
Yeah, it's kind of like that mentor quality that you get right off the bat. They know something you don't. That makes them interesting.
Exactly.
And whereas, a character like Frodo, you don't think he knows anything yet. He's learning as he goes, and so you're learning as he's learning. And of course, through the course of the whole story, he goes through an incredible arc, and he overcomes some great adversity, and he comes to great realizations, and so does the reader with him. But that doesn't make him interesting on the first page. That he's that vehicle that the reader is being used to bring the reader along. Whereas, like in the case of, like you were saying with Logan Ninefingers, he knows he's interesting because he knows something you don't, and you want to find that out.
Because are we just thinking like on a movie parallel? So like Luke Skywalker is Frodo. He's that plain vanilla kid that we learn the world and go through. But come on, Han Solo. The first time you see Han Solo on screen, come on, we all wanted to be Han Solo, isn't it? So like, what is it? Is it just a look? Is it just an attitude? What?
No, it's that
you know,
gravitas.
everyone likes that sort of.
Yeah.
He's a cocky, funny guy. Everyone likes a cocky, funny guy, as opposed to just arrogant. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was going to go off something that Steve said about memorable characters, and it's something that I've been thinking about because in our previous episode we discussed a lot about likability versus relatability, and I mean, a character, as long as their motivations are articulated, they don't have to be relatable. But I was trying to think of examples outside speculative fiction, so like from the classics. So, for example, let's say Pip from Great Expectations. He's likable and he's relatable. Of course, this is all going to vary a lot depending on the reader, but I'm saying broad agreement is, let's think about Mr. Rochester from Jane Eyre. He's not exactly likable in some of the things that he does, but he is relatable in that we understand why he does the things that he does. And then we have like this spectrum of characters. One of the biggest examples for me would be Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights. He's neither likable nor relatable, but he's utterly memorable. Like anybody who has read Wuthering Heights or who knows Wuthering Heights knows who Heathcliff is. Or another one which I read recently, The Phantom of the Opera. The titular character, it's the same. He's not relatable or really likable, but he's extremely memorable. And I think that memorability of a character, but now coming back to bringing it back to what Jose was saying, if we are talking fiction, I think it is totally about the deftness of the author. There is something that Tolkien is doing, there is something that Emily Bronte is doing, there's something that Charles Dickens is doing that makes the reader engage with the personalities, even if they are repulsive or they are very, very endearing. It's all about the power of words and whether they go for a psychological portrait or they leave an air of enigma around it. That is sort of the author's bag of tricks. But I think it's very much in fiction, if we are talking about purely fiction and not other media. It's about what they do with words, what the specific author does with words. Tolkien is actually I know he doesn't get, he sometimes gets this reputation that he doesn't do characters that well. And I keep wondering, did I read a different book? Because according to me, Lord of the Rings has incredible characters. And when I say incredible, I don't mean in terms of deep psychological portraits, but I mean they're extremely memorable. I come away from the Scouring of the Shire, and the last scene is etched in my memory. So I think memorability is probably a easier benchmark to think about when we think about good character writing in fiction. That when we read the book, months passed, and because proper nouns are tough, maybe even the name is forgotten, but we know that the person, that entity was there.
Yeah, you're right. A lot depends upon the author's words, because the different archetypes and methods to get there can all be the same no matter who's writing. But of course, you're right. The writer's ability to use those things, to use these elements of form and stuff like that. The writer's ability to do that is what's going to engage you and get you interested.
Agree.
I was going to sort of put a small question, sort of a follow-up question to which everyone, I would love to hear everyone's thoughts. So if we are thinking a bit about sort of character depth or character exploration, So theoretically, then, assuming the same page time or the length of a novel, a single POV should have maximum. We should have maximum insight into the character. Like, let's say something like Picture of Dorian Gray, and then as it becomes multi POV, as the cast increases, there is a possibility that it gets more and more diffuse. But we know from reading fantasy, especially as a genre, is that's not the case. There are people who, like, there are single POV books where we are completely unable to connect with the character, and there are multi POV books where every single character have, their identity and memorability. So I was wondering how does that balance struck? I mean, on one side we have single POV, which should be maximum depth, and on the other side we have multiple POV, which should be very diffuse, but it's not really like that. How does an author actually strike that balance?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
I think the only person here who could try to answer that is Susana, who's the only one that writes.
No, it's not. Oh, we need to talk at the end of this, Jose. He's a pretty good writer.
Oh, yeah.
I have to pick his brain. Yeah. I don't know. I have, I think it's 12 POVs in Weird Gods alone. Did that help the book? I don't think so, to be fair. Did it make better characters? No, it was all about the journey of one character. But I know what you mean, and honestly, I don't know. Even as an author, sometimes you just kind of I hate the word vibe, but it's the only one that comes to mind. You kind of vibe with the character better than others, and it doesn't even mean that you like it better than others. I am writing from the point of view of the Minotaur at this point, and I'm loving it. I'm really in sync with the character. Am I a Minotaur? No. But, sometimes, and that comes across on the page, at least for me, I think so. Sometimes you love a character and you pull all your strengths, and you just do your best, you write your best, and you research and you add, the best character art, etc., and it still comes out flat. And then there's a side character that it's there just to decorate the plot, and ended up becoming the main character of their own novella. So I don't know. You need to invite writers with a bit more experience than me, because it just happens.
I very much relate to your comment about the side character becoming the main highlight, because that is what Ori in Kingkiller is for me. I'm not technically a huge fan of both. I like him. I'm interested in his story, but Ori she's luminescent. Anything about her I would read, and that's not something that I think the author planned, because it was not even initially in the first draft, which Patrick Rothfuss has said, and somehow it just works. I don't know, but I want to ask Steve, Jose, and Jarrod to chime in. So I thought I'll ask everybody with my knowledge of what their a fantasy series that they like. So Jarrod, one series that you like a lot is Malazan, and that is, I would say, ultimate diffuse in terms of number of POVs. It's a challenge. Do you still find yourself connecting to characters nevertheless, or finding moments of meaning with them as you went through the books?
Absolutely, yeah. Erickson's kind of a unique case. He has this ability to make you care about the smallest character in his multi, 1,000 character cast. He's able to do it in a short time, because a lot of his sections, he has very long chapters, but it's always broken up into sections when he changes POVs and stuff like that. and he has every single one of those sections has this kind of short story feel to him, and so he does a kind of full arc within that small section, and it really brings out the character he's talking about in that short section, and he does that. Like I have never encountered that kind of style of writing until I read Malazan. I mean, Martin does it somewhat in the Song of Ice and Fire series when he just makes one chapter about a character, and so you learn that character. You learn that it's from their POV, and you learn about them. Erickson kind of goes to an extreme with that. He has much larger chapters, and he breaks. He has multi POVs from a bunch of characters within that chapter, especially during large battle scenes where you're getting a lot of POVs from different soldiers and stuff like that. And there was actually I did a segment on that on the little short story pieces in the death of a character in one of the battles in Malazan. And you could just read that section, and then you could read that section by itself and just get something out of it and learn about that character and feel for that character in that short arc. So that's just speaking about my favorite series. Everybody has their own way of explaining their characters, and his is unique in that regard.
I was going to ask Steve next. So we have Malazan, which is sort of the extreme, I would say, in terms of number of POVs. Although I'm going to ask Jose about another series which comes close. But one of your favorite series is The Prince of Nothing, which had. I mean, you have mentioned multiple times that it had an impact on you, and that is sort of intermediate in terms of number of POVs. So how was your journey connecting with the characters? Did you immediately sink into the world? Did you immediately connect to some characters more than others? How was it as a journey as you went through the series?
Well, I think it helped that most of the characters are broken up by chapter, so you get bits and pieces of them for extended periods of time. That's why I think Malazan is so hard for some people like me to get into. Even though I like the story, we swap heads really fast. So I think that's why it takes some adjustment to get into to kind of, because you get settled in with one person and then you go to another person in a different part of the world, and so I think it does help a dummy like me to stick with a character for a while, to kind of just like dig in and get comfortable and kind of get to know them a little bit over the course of some time. So I think that does help, that having, extended periods of time with one character or another, and the limited POVs too. I think Gardens of the Moon has like 300 characters or something. Is that right? There's quite a few.
Yeah, something like that.
It's insane. So I think that does help me too. Limited POVs.
But you should love Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. Then it's all one.
Oh,
yeah.
It's all one POV.
I'm going to ask Jose about one trilogy which I know he has mentioned that it's a favorite of his, which is Live Ship Traders, which is multi-POV. And then I'm going to ask about the dreaded series, maybe just the initial books, The Wonderful Wheel of Time.
You know it's coming.
Which has certain POVs, a certain number of POVs, and gradually there's a proliferation. So I wanted to ask, especially, both the journeys, assuming you read them in order. So Farseer, it was single POV, and then you went to this multi-POV cast with Robin Hobb. And in the other one also, in Eye of the World, it's mainly Rand 80% of the time, and then gradually you get into more POVs. Do you have some thoughts on how in one you were able to connect with the characters more, while in the other it was less of a connect?
I'm going to preface what I'm going to say by apologizing profusely to any Wheel of Time fan, Robert Jordan fan that may be listening in now. But I think, Paromita, you are pitting like a chess grandmaster of characterization in Robin Hood with the piece of shit that is the Wheel of Time. It's a piece of shit. I think the writing craft of Robin Hood and Robert Jordan, they don't even. It's not the same job. Okay, it's not. So basically, in answer to your question, now, Robin Hood, like I said, she's a master crafter of character. I haven't read any books where the character work, the development, the inner thought, the journey, the relationships, and no one comes close to Robin Hood. The Wheel of Time is just boring. It's dull. It's the characters are all Mary Sue's and Gary Stu's. That there's no effort whatsoever in there to motivate the character, and then we just got the excuse that they are Tavern, they are the chosen ones. So, but why are they superpowered? They are Tavern. Why are they going on an adventure journey to save the world? Because they are Tavern. Nothing is explained. Everything just got this gimmicky reason why. So no. But also, sorry, just coming back to what you were saying before about memorability and characterization, I think like good writers, just like a writing sort of 101 course that you would do. It's just little tricks that you can do to make your character more memorable. So like Glockcat, why is he memorable? Because he could have been any old sort of sage, but the fact that he's a cripple makes it more interesting. More memorable, because you've added that. In Game of Thrones, again, Tyrion is a really interesting character, but you make him I don't know what's the politically correct word these days, a dwarf or whatever it is, vertically challenged person. He already is a lot more memorable. You gave them a unique voice, and Terry Pratchett does that a lot because he's written. Are you okay, Steve?
I'm okay.
You're right, yeah?
I'm good.
And Terry Pratchett, he wrote tens of characters, but he gave each like a uniqueness, whether it's a physical trait or a way in which they speak that makes them instantly recognizable. And I think those are little tricks that authors do to make the characters either more interesting or more memorable. But you cannot compare, Paromita, the character work in Robin Hood and Robert Jordan. They are different. It's different species. They're different.
Fair enough. I was going to say, can we level the playing field a bit by comparing maybe Live Ship to, say, the initial books of A Song of Ice and Fire or First Love?
Ooh, okay. So now we're talking. I think Martin does a bit more of that trickery thing. Like I said, like Tyrion is the way he is, and he plays more to archetype, whereas Robin Hood does a lot more in-depth work. She spends a lot of time setting the story and the background, whereas with Martin, it's a little bit quicker. Straight away, the descriptions of the physicality or the actions. In book 1 of A Song of Ice and Fire, you have your idea of the goodies and the baddies. With Robin Hood, everything is a lot more slow-paced, I think. And, that will work for some people and it will not work for other people. And then your taste will take you in one direction or another.
It's funny, I never thought about the parallels between Glockta and Tyrion. They are both cynics. They are both disabled, both tortured, underestimated characters, wealthy, and their wealth doesn't do them much good in the grand scheme of things. Clever. There are tricks. Yeah, make them intelligent, make them, wise, and having them know something other characters don't know, make them, conflicted, tortured, some horrible background, make them disfigured. That is very easy trick too. If you want to make a character attractive, just give them scars. It's kind of a thing, very common in romance specifically. So yeah, there are tricks we can use. They don't always work, but they are there.
I think we talked about characters and having that cool factor right off the bat. I think in movies like Jose, you mentioned Han Solo. I think we get a visual of Han before we can see him and his clothes and his kind of his attitude, and he's he has that aura about him. How do you do that through text though? Like how? I have no. I don't have the answer, but I'm curious. Like, how does that happen? How do you so quickly convey to the reader that this person is intelligent, this person is charismatic, this person is knowledgeable? Do you give them an archetype right away? Or?
No, you can make them say
Usually
something.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, Paromita, go ahead. I'd like the reader's perspective.
I was just going to say, I think we were about to say the same thing, more or less, maybe just different phrasing. I was going to say maybe interactions with people who are in the moment less knowledgeable. Usually interactions are one of the strongest way to show how a character is. And the other one which works, which is very, very common in literary fiction, also common in some fantasy and science fiction, but very common in literary fiction, is interior monologue. But it's tough to do. And I think it's really tough to do well. But when done well, it can immediately, because I think one of the reasons we read is we are looking for human connection. Maybe that's one of the reasons we read. And so when we get true interiority of someone's psyche in text, where the physical attributes are for us to imagine to some extent, but their mind is at one with, we find something to connect with them. I think it can be a very, very moving reading experience. That's.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Yeah. And there's also there's like different methods that an author can use to deliver their character development to people, and so it matters upon the reader on what they're expecting and what they're geared towards reading. Like Paromita just said, you had that direct method that you just mentioned, where the author's telling you about a character, and then you can have the character development just through dialogue, and you can try to get it that way, and then you can have it through see the character through other characters' eyes, and that can make that character cool, and then you can also have just the character action and what the character's is doing that can draw you to that character. So it might depend upon how you as a reader would want that information brought to you, in what manner you prefer.
Yes, very true. I thought of one thing which sort of follows on from what Steve asked, and I think Jose and Susana also mentioned before. So we've been talking a lot about series or stories in general, where there is leeway for the author to develop characters as they please. What about more ideas heavy or theme heavy? I was going to go into science fiction, but let's, for example, start with A Wizard of Earthsea. I think the core of what Le Guin is doing is related to some kind of theming around, the grappling with oneself. how does one balance character work with more ideas-driven or theme-driven fantasy or science fiction?
Sorry.
With a lot of editing.
I don't need that you need to strike a balance. It depends on what the author's intent is. If you take something like Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead, they're two very ideas-heavy based novels, and the characters are just conduits for her philosophy. So really, she didn't need to strike a balance at all. The characters were just a vehicle for the ideas that she wanted to put forward. So I think that's only a concern, if it's a concern for the author, depending on what the author is trying to do. And I think maybe Ayn Rand is at one extreme. I think I haven't read it, but from what I hear, is it Terry Brooks with The Sword of Truth? He also pours a lot of his ideas or his philosophy into the series.
Terry Goodkind.
But I haven't read it. Terry Goodkind. Sorry, yeah, Terry Goodkind. Terry Brooks is Shannara, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I don't know, Jarrod. Have you read Sword of Truth?
I have not. No.
Okay. So I think it's only an issue if the author is trying to strike that balance. If not, you don't care about it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it's a risk very much, isn't it? If the characters, as you said, Jose, are solely ideological mouthpieces, irrespective of whether we align with the ideology or not. A sense of annoyance can develop, and personally, for me, this increases with the length of the book. But a sense of impatience can develop where I feel like I'm being told what to think. And while I appreciate having the author's point of view through their fiction, I also like a little bit of space to think for myself as a reader. So when it gets a bit too heavy-handed, and when the characters become entirely, as you said, some kind of delivery mechanism for a particular ideology, then for me it's usually a miss. I don't know how it is for others. I would love to hear your thoughts.
I guess it depends on the ideology to some degree, or how you like the characters or not. But it is, as a writer, is a very slippery slope as well, because sometimes you want to get a theme across, not even an ideology, just a theme, and it's very easy to go from ideological to preachy. So the editing, just lots of editing, just balance things out.
I don't have an issue with an author preaching to me. It's up to me to decide whether I like the preaching or not. It doesn't bother me. I think people are free to write whatever they want, and I'm free to like it or dislike it. It's not really an issue.
For example, to use an example of Atlas Shrugged, which I, unlike most people, I do enjoy the book. There's two main speeches, ideological speeches in the book. The money speech and John Galt's speech, right? The money speech, I think it's brilliant. It's one of the best things I've ever read. Completely changed my perspective on things. I recommend it to everyone. If you don't want to read the whole thing, which I still think it's a pretty good novel, The Money Speech, it's great. John Galt's speech, which I guess was the point of the whole book, it's a snooze fest. It's just too much. It's just, by the end of it, it just wears you down. And because everything he says was already reiterated and explained and lived through the book. There's no need. It's too preachy, too forced, too much. So that it's, in my opinion, it doesn't ruin the novel for me. I just skip it. this. Don't do that. But but that is a good example of one was just right. There's still a bit of preaching, but it was just right. The other one just, I edited the hell out of it. It didn't need to be that long. What is your opinion, Jose?
I actually enjoyed both novels. They look a bit bricky. Like my uncle got me.
Not the novels.
I can't quite remember.
The speeches in Atlas Shrugged.
It got a little bit boring. The last one was a 150 pages speech long, or something utterly ridiculous.
There was no need for it.
No, and I think you're right. Like the philosophy that she was trying to convey was already clear by that stage, so we didn't need that. And we somehow massively veered off from the whole topic of characters. I think now that I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
It's still interesting. Yeah.
So
go back
to Steve's point.
Well,
about
that speech did it enhance or detract from the characters in that case? I mean,
No, and since we are talking about characters, so the whole thing, for those who haven't read the book, I'm not going to spoil too much, but there's this mystery at the beginning, which was the thing that drew me in about who is John Galt. It's kind of even an expression, who's John Galt, to say, why things happen or why is this? And you spend most of the book thinking, oh my God, who's John Galt? Who's this character greater than life? And he ended up being a great disappointment, to me at least, as a man, as a character. And then after the speech, it just went downhill. So it's a good example that it doesn't matter how well you build up the character or you write or how much ideology you would get to get across, the character can still fall through the cracks, and just everything else in the book. Every other character pretty much is more interesting than him, in my opinion.
I think in both Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, the characters are not even secondary. It really isn't. I mean, Ayn Rand was mostly a thinker / philosopher, and what she was doing with those books is put down her selfish objectivism philosophy out there. So really, and it's very easy to identify with the hero of the story because he's the one, doing things his way against society's impositions and all that sort of stuff. It's not really, character work is totally secondary there. I think of the two, I cannot quite remember. Whichever one is the shorter one, I found is better than the. So I think the Fountainhead is the shorter one.
Fountainhead is shorter.
Yeah, so I enjoyed that one a lot more than Atlas Shrugged.
Yes.
I wanted to share this example. It's probably something all or most of you are familiar with. And it's something I didn't even realize it until the Purple Bookworm, who is a member of the forum, she pointed it out to me. So in Feast for Crows, we have Brienne of Tarth's point of view, and her entire arc for a large part of that book is going from place to place, looking for this particular individual, whom the reader is aware is not at any of the places that Brienne is looking for. And it is repeated multiple times. And one of the very common things that I have read, and which I felt the first time on my first read, is why are these chapters there? Why, if the reader knows that this individual is not at the place, at any of the places that Brienne is looking for, why did George R.R. Martin put in these chapters? And I was like, the common complaints from readers are that it's filler, that it's unedited. But let us assume that even if that is true, why put it at all is the question. Because filler or unedited would be if it's, if it's five times or 3 times, like that is where that comes in. But if this is known to the reader from the very beginning, which it is, why is it at all? And I remember listening to this video by the Purple Bookworm, and she said this phrase, anti-war theming. And then when I reread this book, it just hit me that this is probably Martin's, in a way, because it's called A Song of Ice and Fire, not A Game of Thrones. This is probably Martin's, one of his few moments where he's actively telling the reader through Brienne, as she goes through these war-ravaged places, that look, all you lords and all you people fighting for the throne, while your country, your lands are bleeding. The absolute ravages of war, each time in each location, and he reinforces that. So that was a very moving and very impactful moment for me, where I realized that Martin is delivering something very, very profound as a series overall theme through character interaction. And it's not to develop Brienne's character so much, other than her honor. I mean, she's very honorable, which has already been established. But it's more to show us the aftermath, the wreckage of, this crescendo that we thought has happened in Storm of Swords, that the land is in ruin. So that was something I wanted to share with you all. I wondered if there are any moments in any book which, like, you had that aha moment when you reread it later, or when you thought about it later, where the character, something about a character or something about the way they interacted with others really hit on a particular message or theme for you?
I don't reread a lot, not as often as you. So I immediately I go to kind of movies first. And I see what you mean. I can only think of examples of A Song of Ice and Fire. So.
That's great. It is such a great example. I mean, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a testament that in 2 episodes that we have been talking about characters, the series has come up over and over again. And truly, Martin must have accomplished something magnificent that it's there in our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Susana, what about another series that you reread recently, is The Expanse?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they kind of remain the same. I mean, I appreciated Hold a little bit more. I still loved Miller. I still loved Avasarala. I still prefer the series version of Avasarala. There were a few realizations, but not so many as in Game of Thrones, to be fair. Game of Thrones, or The Song of Ice and Fire, should I say, has layers and layers. There are passages that I have marked that I'm still trying to decipher. That last book better come out. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm going through that. Because I'm.
Yeah, I was going to ask Jarrod, because you're rereading Malasan. Is that happening for you a lot of time?
Almost every other page, I'm like realizing stuff I didn't catch the first time, and I think you're gonna get that with any really good writer like Martin and Wirtz is another one too. You're gonna get that because there's a lot in there. There's a lot. When every word has a purpose. You're gonna miss stuff the first time. It would be almost impossible to catch everything when you have that level of writing. And that was I like what you just laid out about Brienne's character and why those chapters were there. They were definitely there for a reason. It wasn't just filler that Martin was putting in. And when you come to that realization on a second read, that's a wonderful feeling, I think. And I'm getting that a lot with the reread of Malazan because it is so huge. Of course you're going to forget a ton of stuff. So I totally relate with that feeling.
I wanted to ask, is there something etched in your mind recently which really has stayed with you from your
Yeah,
reread?
I just read something today, and it's hard to explain without giving away like story points or whatever. But there was a because I'm reading the eighth book right now, and there's a character in there who he goes through a large transformation through the course of the series, and he returns to his point of origin basically, and he's a completely different person, but everyone there is treating him the same from when he left. And so there's this this dichotomy. There's this it's not there's a what do you call it, there's a contrast between their perception of who he is and who he has become, and that contrast is actually a theme that goes throughout the whole book. That now I'm reading a second time, I see that with a lot of other characters that I didn't see before, and so it's really like a theme running throughout the whole book. And this is it's a 1,200 page book, so there's a lot to run through, and so he also ends up he's a likable character, and he ends up killing off a character that nobody liked, everybody hated. But the circumstances of it were kind of tragic. The first time you read it, you're kind of cheering, like, yeah, But then now you're reading it a second time, I'm kind of like, that's.
What are we cheering for?
Yeah, why are we cheering? Because it's not a nice act. He just killed a man in cold blood. It's what we shouldn't be cheering for that. This should and that is brought out too as part of the themes and stuff like that, and he's like the most, he feels the tragedy more than anybody else around it. So it's very those are the kind of things that just really hit you on a second read.
Well,
I wanted to ask Steve the same thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's just I finally thought about a book, the book that I reread more times than any other, which is Wuthering Heights, and you mentioned it earlier. And it's been an experience every time I read it, because there's so many layers to it, and so to keep it brief.
Same.
Yeah, so many layers, and so the first time I read it, I was about 13, 14. It was, such a tragic romance, I'm so sad for them kind of feeling. As I grew older, upon rereads, a few things that I noticed. One, Nellie, which is kind of a neutral character, so you think, even though she's the narrator, I hate her more and more each time, and I question her narration more and more each time. Kathy, what a bitch. And I still relate to her, but I think she was... I understood her better when I was younger, and I think she was a product of just being very young. We kind of forget that they were so young. Heathcliff, you said that he was unlikable and unrelatable and all those things. It's one of my favorite characters of all time, even unlikable, but I do think he's very relatable. To me, at least, again, as I get older, he almost went from my version of Prince Charming to just almost a soulmate, not in a romantic way, but I do get him where all that hatred comes from, and how such intense hatred, passion, when unchecked, how far can it go? So it went from romance to a revenge tale, and every time I read it, it almost feels like a different book. That is truly, art.
I
True art.
totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree, and I'm not so surprised when you said this about Heathcliff, because my mother says the same thing. So when she reread this story with me, she has also reread it many, many times. I think it's her favorite Bronte, and she says much of the same thing, that yes, it is like for me, the second I read as same as you, Susanna. I read it once when I was a teenager, and that time I was like, this is kind of a tragic passion story. And then I reread it recently earlier in the year, and I was like, oh my God, this is a sociopath. I'm scared
it's
now.
all about
Like, what
revenge.
the hell
Yeah,
did I read?
it's so dark.
Yeah.
It's just revenge. Yeah.
But my mother read it with me at the same time, and she said that look how doomed they are. So yes, but I mean, yes, they are, but ultimately they are to be pitied. Yes, they are maladjusted, and yes, they are, I mean, very, very deranged almost in a way. And again, as you said, the very important point about who is narrating is very much relevant, which is something that Emily Bronte, I mean, genius. Anyway, but and with that knowledge, with that perspective, when I reread it this time, I felt that sense of tragedy. Like it is all pervasive tragedy now for me. And I mean, that is amazing. Within the same year, the book can generate so much feeling. I mean, now it's my favorite Bronte as well. The one which can make me vacillate in feeling so much is definitely the one to watch out for.
Yeah, all range of emotions.
All range, truly. I was going to ask Steve the same question that I asked Jarrod, because I know that now you are on a journey of rereading Prince of Nothing, and you have been sharing your thoughts. And a lot of the thoughts have been about foreshadowing with respect to the world and what happens. But I wanted to ask you specifically about character arcs. Are there things that you're noticing that Backer put in the beginning which sort of indicate where characters go later on?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a couple of main characters. Well, one, Espenette is one of the main characters, and I won't spoil her journey for anyone. But I think there's a lot about her character that's established early that I didn't catch the first time. A lot of her motivations and her view of the world and where she sees herself and where she wants to be, I guess, without saying too much. So yeah, I think those things I missed on the first read. That now that I know where she goes, things I just went right over my head. But now, you know, I don't think anyone would really see it until you had context. So I don't feel too bad.
I'm trying to think of other series where, like when I reread it, it completely recontextualized characters for me. I think The Song of Ice and Fire is probably a very, very, very strong one. Can't think of any which really have done it to that extent. And curiously, I mean, I like the characters in Dune and Dune Messiah a lot, but I cannot think of too many science fiction series where I can say the same as I am able to say about epic fantasy. And I'm not sure why. Is epic science fiction too focused on ideas sometimes at the expense of character development? Or is that too broad a generalization?
I think maybe we're thinking too much in the realms of sci-fi and fantasy, and you know, Susana and I did the romance reading challenge by Gianni last month,
right?
And you know, it was actually nice to step away from dragons and wizards into the deep south and follow, you know, some serial murder killings with a splash of smut in there. And I think maybe sci-fi and fantasy, there's a great focus on the great hero's journey and the great sort of near world-ending events. And maybe in other genres you get there's maybe a deeper emphasis on character. You know, we were talking before about Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple or Sam Spade from the Falcon Maltese, and I don't know. You get maybe we're just too narrow-minded here. We're just thinking about characters in the context of science fiction and fantasy.
For me personally, Christie definitely. Every single novel, her characters, which is why I reread them over and over again. And sometimes one of my friends used to ask me, she used to guess them right all the time. And I think I've only guessed 2 correctly ever. So, but she used to ask me, how are you rereading these? And I reread them exactly for the tremendous insight into psychology that Agatha Christie has. Even the main character, the side character, the antagonist, every single person will be imbued with personality. And it will be related to the social structure. It will be related to the backdrop, so the historical backdrop. So, for example, the post-war England, where things are gradually declining, staff is declining. All those things are interwoven in. It's quite amazing. But I think Tana French is another person who's written the Dublin Murder Squad novels. She does really very nice character-focused mystery. But I have read Cookie. Well, I won't say Cookie Cutter. That sounds condescending. But I have read mystery novels where it's very much about who did it and not so much focused on the character. So again, I think as Jarrod said, it totally depends on the writer and the reader combination.
Yeah, your Sherlock Holmes stuff isn't character driven so much; it's more plot driven.
Yeah.
What's the mystery? What's the plot? How did it happen? And it's just basically most of the time it's Sherlock telling you, here's how it happened. And here's what I devised. And so it all stories don't have to be character driven, but you're right.
Yeah.
Jose, you're right about our focus on fantasy. A lot of fantasy is character-driven stuff, and I wonder. And a lot of sci-fi is, idea-driven stuff. So, and of course, there's a lot of crossover here and there. There's tons of different. That's just a broad generalization, really, but it makes you wonder what attracts the fantasy reader to have. Are character-driven readers attracted more to fantasy than other stuff, or vice versa?
Oh, definitely. But in my opinion, at least speaking for myself, that's why I read fantasy and science fiction. But there's also another aspect. I'm here trying to figure out how to articulate it. Like Paromita talked about the picture of Dorian Gray as being a memorable character. And I was here thinking, he himself as a character is not particularly interesting. Like, his circumstances are interesting. And there's a lot of that in fantasy and science fiction. Sometimes it's not so much the character, but the world that they are in, the circumstances they're in, the whatever magical or technological, and that makes their journey interesting. They can be just regular, average dude, not even very likable, intelligent, or not even very competent. But because they are in that world that is so vibrant for the reader, they become interesting. But I was thinking of more examples and just got stuck on Dorian Gray. So help me out.
I don't know, because I was thinking...
And anyone from House Targaryen, pretty much. Without the dragons, they would just be sociopaths. Seriously.
Yeah.
I thought another trilogy series, whatever you want to call it, that does great character work outside of fantasy would be the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, fantastic!
I think we've probably all read that, and you haven't. Oh, okay,
I have not.
Jarrod.
Seen the movie,
I
but
think you
I haven't read it.
Still
right,
counts.
but
Then it's fine.
Okay.
The character of Lisbeth Salander is very memorable again, and we're talking about those writer tricks where you make her super skinny and you make her have the tattoos and sort of things that in your mind help you to visualize a very memorable character. But then in there, he's I suppose he sort of maybe criticize him, the upper echelons of Swedish society. Everyone is some sort of sexual deviant, and everyone is living in an open marriage, and everyone is doing this, that, the other. But I think it's it's a trilogy. I think someone has written another 2 or 3 books following the same titular girl with a dragon tattoo. But that first trilogy, particularly the first book, I think it does great character work there.
It is. Oh, Lisbeth Salander is like one of my most memorable characters. I admire her so much, so much.
Can I bring a little bit of mythology to the mix?
Please.
So
Always.
Please.
I was pretty much lynched in a Discord server for saying this, but so it's the same. Loki, amazing character, and I'm not even going into Marvel Loki. I'm just talking, mythological Loki. He's the wild card, the chaos god, the trickster god in Norse mythology. He stands out because he's unlike any other character, any other god in the pantheon. Odin kinda, it gives him trouble because he's wise, but still pretty much everyone else is very two-dimensional. Puts him with in the Olympian pantheon, where there's several trickster gods there, not just the one. We have Hermes, Prometheus, even Zeus. I mean, there's nothing that Loki does that Zeus can't do. It's a completely different dynamic. He would never be able to fool the Olympian gods as easily as he does the Norse. Then sometimes it's like that with characters in stories. Sometimes you don't need to have a great character, super clever, super this and that and the other. You just need to have very bland side characters, secondary characters for the character to stand out. And it's how to balance that. That's why ensembles are so hard to do, because everyone needs to be full-fledged, three-dimensional, complex character. So steering away from mythology, one of my favorite TV shows is Black Sails. There's no secondary characters in that show. Yeah, everyone is the main character. Everyone is going head-to-head. Everyone has a complete story arc, complete personality, background, and it's amazing. So again, setting and who the characters interact with is very important to create a great character. That's it. I said
Black
it in all the
Sails.
comments. People are just going to lynch me and say, "You are saying that Norse mythology characters are flat?" Anyway, be fine.
I would love to talk about the way that series ends. I think that's so interesting. I won't say too much, but
Please, let's talk about. I am desperate to find someone to talk about episode by episode. Please.
really?
It was
Yes.
a while ago.
Don't play with me. We'll do it.
There's so much in it.
I've been wanting to rewatch
Every
it.
episode it's like a movie. There's so much going on so fast.
Oh,
It's
I love
amazing.
Black Sail. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got lynched for that?
Is it?
It doesn't seem like a hot take.
What's that?
You almost got lynched for that? It doesn't seem like a hot take, like the mythology thing.
Man, it was a Norse mythology oriented
Oh.
channel, so they didn't like to take it all.
Oh,
Okay. It's getting warm in here. Yeah.
But it is what I think. That's why I wrote what I wrote the way, because, I think he deserved proper adversaries. Odin is there as well, of course, but yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And so much of the mythology is up for a lot of interpretation too, and depending on where the story comes from and who's telling it. So you can definitely have like those characters kind of start out flat until they're brought to life by whatever story is being told about them.
What about villains? We're here talking about, well, I guess we talk about several villains, but there's, this saying that villains always have the best lines, which I think it's true. Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Anyone?
Because the better the villain, the better the hero, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, there's somewhere in the back of my mind. There's something about you're only as good as the people you beat, isn't it? And that's why, if I can draw the parallel to boxing, like Muhammad Ali was the greatest ever because he fought the best ever. He ducked no one and he fought everyone. Whereas in the present day, you got all these top 3-4 heavyweights and they're not fighting each other. They're just fighting everyone else. And it's like, there's no claim to being the best of your era because you haven't fought everyone in your era. So I think with, the better the villain, the more heroic the deed, the more gravitas to the story. And, I think Batman has got fantastic villains. I think he's got the best villains in literature.
Yeah, but to me, at least, he only actually became a hero. When what was The Dark Knight with Christian Bale. Before that, he was just a character, comic book character, two-dimensional. It was only when he had, again, a proper villain that makes him, be a bit of a villain as well. Be a little bit, less heroic and had to question his morals. I think, a good villain is a villain that is able to corrupt the hero to some degree. So eventually would bring the best out of him, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting point because I was thinking along this actually that who we are talking about. I mean, sometimes it's very obvious, but who we are referring to as a villain is sometimes anchored to the moral axis of the world, and that sometimes might be up for interpretation both within the text itself intended by the author, but also, I mean, for the reader personally. I mean, for example, there are some characters where I'm just like, perish, like I don't care, I don't want to hear your motivation, perish. A very strange one was I had this very visceral reaction for those who have read First Law. It is in Blade itself, in a particular chapter with Colonel West, and when that chapter happened, I was just like, please perish. I literally do not care about you anymore.
You have to give me more than that, Paromita, please. I don't know what you're talking about.
He is revealed as a bystander in the atrocities inflicted on a certain individual who is very close to him, and then he is also a perpetrator of those atrocities.
Right. Okay.
Himself.
Okay. Okay.
And when I read that, I was just like, perish. I do not want to know about you. But I mean, so that was a very visceral reaction. And in the moral compass of this first law world, which I honestly don't know what it is, even now after reading the trilogy. I mean, Colonel West was one of the manageable ones, one would almost say. But I personally despise him probably one of the most. And it's a very strange thing. So that's why when I was thinking about villains, I kind of get where Logan is coming from. I kind of get where Gloxa is coming from. I don't get where West is coming from. And so he just goes into that trash category for me. I wonder whether other people have these sort of, varied reactions to perceived antagonists.
Yeah, some of them are just very despicable. But then again,
I want to ask a fun question. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Still ruminating, thinking.
No, my question is extremely silly, so please go ahead.
I wasn't going at. I was thinking out loud, and I lost the train of thought.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll ask it. So we talked a lot about A Song of Ice and Fire, and Susana mentioned villains. So just for fun, I prepared this like rogues gallery of A Song of Ice and Fire. And in my rogues gallery, here are the following people who are there for sure. Joffrey Baratheon, Ramsay Bolton, Euron Greyjoy, Gregor Clegane. And on the doorstep, like they can be in or they can be out. I still can't decide. One is Melisandre Shahrazai and one is Peter Baelish. So that's my rogues gallery with two people on the doorstep. Does anybody have any additions, omissions, thoughts?
No Lannisters?
I disagree with Melisandre and with Theon a little bit. Even as villains go, is in the world of Ice and Fire is very small, and I disagree with Melisandre. Everyone else, yeah, sure. Who else can go there? Because you see, you again, the bar is it's quite. Everyone could be a villain there.
In Game of Thrones, it's tough because they're all so well-rounded characters that you see their motivations. I mean, maybe not. I don't know if we ever saw the Mountain's motivations, but definitely like Theon Greyjoy, you see his.
Theon definitely, yeah, but
you
Euron,
see his motivations.
he's like a freak.
Oh, Euron, yeah, that's
Like
right. That's his uncle,
Euron.
right? Yeah.
Oh, that's what you said. Oh, I misunderstood. Yeah, Euron definitely. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what is happening?
Yeah, and you wonder if how many characters would Martin detail to the level he does some of the other ones, and if he ever got to the point where he detailed those villains further, could there be another character arc that redeems them like Jaime Lannister, or are they just, outright villainous or what have you?
It's interesting that the Night King, I know, or whatever equivalent in the books, wasn't mentioned. So, not a villain then. That's interesting. But you see how it works. You see, yeah,
that guy, yeah.
You see how it works. We don't need to know his
Oopsie.
True.
Because it's not. It's just a force of nature. Might have been a villain at some point. But it's a different.
I have, I thought of another sort of, again, related to villains. It's, again, perception, reader perception. Have you ever had a very visceral negative reaction to a character in a book where you understand and even respect and possibly even admire what the author is doing, but still every time you read about the character, you're like, blood pressure going up. Has that ever happened to any of you?
Circe.
I think
Many visceral reactions with that one. Which I
think some
blame
people take
the villain.
Sorry to interrupt, Susana. I was going to say some people take their reading way too seriously. I've seen some booktubers do reviews where they are genuinely upset because something nasty has happened to a character, and it's like, you do realize that it is a fictional character in a work of fiction. That you don't have to be upset because someone got raped or killed or whatever. So, like, don't get me wrong, I've cried reading Discworld, so I am capable of feeling emotions, but on the main, I don't think that reading books is where I'm gonna experience the whole range of the two emotions that I'm capable of. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Maybe I'm the crazy one once again.
You're dead inside.
I thought I was partially dead inside. But
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Paromita. Wow. That's the level now. Okay.
For me, again, for people who know, it's a character whose name starts with K in Live Ship Traders, and it's not the one who comes in first. Not the first K. There are two Ks. It's not the first K. It's the second K, who assumes a particular role in the third book. I was just I'm still mad. I cannot talk without my voice getting elevated. Like I have to artificially tell myself, Paromita, calm down, fictional character. I just want to throw the book and scream in rage. Like that was my very visceral reaction. The other one, I think, which I've mentioned, I think I mentioned it briefly in the previous episode, is where I appreciated very much what the author was doing throughout, but I shuddered throughout, was Lolita by Nabokov. It was terrifying to read. I think Lolita qualifies as a horror novel for the reaction it elicits in the reader.
And I have to read that book. It's really, thanks to you, it bumped to my TBR. I mean, I enjoyed the movie, and I really need to read the book. But yeah. So I'll hold my judgment until then.
So I think somebody mentioned Batman has the best villains. Is that why he doesn't kill any of them?
Who has the best villains?
So
You guys are so great, I can't kill you.
So it's like, this is something that's always kind of bothered me about Batman. How many people have died? How many innocent people have died because he refuses to kill?
Exactly. Yeah. Good point.
That's a fucking good point.
And that is a problem with many heroes. When you actually think about it, the amount of deaths they caused by, trying to do the right thing or well, if you don't want to kill, don't be a hero. Heroes, they need to be a bit more that's my opinion.
It's funny because at least two members on the panel are part of this read along. This is why I'm irritated with Arathon and Wars of Light and Shadow up to where I am. I'm like, do something. I'm just so frustrated with him. Have either of you felt that way, Steve, Jarrod, sometimes, or do you get where he's coming from?
Yeah, no, I haven't felt frustrated. I get where he's coming from. He also, well, we'll see where it goes with the next book.
Yeah.
I haven't written him off yet as a hopeless guy who just keeps, making the wrong choices or what have you. Because there's been a lot of subtle hints that if he does let go, like we would want him to, then other things will go horribly wrong. So there's a reason for him holding back, and I know there is. There's got to be, and I know what's going to be. It's going to be revealed soon. I just have that feeling.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
I think,
apologies for. Yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Suzanne. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, apologizing for bringing the Wheel of Time, but Rand is a good example of that.
That's so true. But poor Rand, I
it's
felt
the
bad for
most
him.
powerful magic user. Is a god in that world, and he spends how many books just denying, moaning, holding back, and then eventually kind of loses control and what have I done? And more moaning. It would have been a more interesting series if if he was the villain. I think I would love to have read the Wheel of Time, like the previous era, just when he was a dragon.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
it would be much more interesting because that killed me. So yeah, I think it was the hardest take to get through in the book.
I feel bad for Rand at times, but I do agree that the point was belabored too much. I totally agree with that. And that's where my frustration, I think, with Wheel of Time is that I think there is a very good 6 to 7 book series somewhere in that 14 books. But how or what or where, I cannot pinpoint. I simply cannot as a reader.
That would be a huge.
And so what I have is...
That'd be a huge project to actually break that down into where you want it.
Yeah. And it would be so personal because there are some people who are irritated by some characters, there are some people who are frustrated with other characters. But I very much agree because I like the premise of what Jordan wanted to do, that if an ordinary person is suddenly told, you have to save the world or everything goes to hell, that could be like devastating for someone's mind. Which is something that actually Lord of the Rings, it's true, like Frodo, he rises to the occasion. He thinks about the Shire, he thinks about who he cares for, and he just goes with it. But not everybody would be able to do that. And so Jordan wanted to explore that. But I agree with Susana that it just went... The way it was done was just prolonged too much. Too much. And it didn't help that none of the factions listened to him. Everybody's just, we'll do our own thing. And Rand is like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Something I've noticed, I think more so in the last 10 or 15 years since Marvel has been a thing, unfortunately, is that people attach themselves to characters. Like, for instance, in Man of Steel, spoiler alert for Man of Steel for a 10, 12-year-old movie, when he kills Zod, there was a big uproar of, oh my, Superman doesn't kill. Even though he was saving innocent people, there was this big deal about why, like, Superman just wouldn't never do that. That's not my Superman. Or when Batman versus Superman hurts or kills people, there's a big thing about, oh, Batman will never do that. Like, do you know Batman? Like, why do you, like, he's not your character. He doesn't belong to you. It's just an interpretation of a character. It's a guy in a suit. Calm down. But I'm wondering, why do some people attach themselves to characters and become so offended, I guess you can say, when the character isn't portrayed in a way that they want? What is it in our minds or some people's minds that kind of flip that switch that they become so attached? What is that?
I think.
I can answer.
Go on, Paromita. Go on.
So because like, I'm going to give an example of something where I'm genuinely I'm still attached to it. I know it's childish, but I'm still attached to it, which is the Harry Potter fandom. I grew up with those books, and part of the appeal of Harry Potter, I believe, as it was being written, was that as Harry grew and his friends grew up, we grew up with them. Enter Cursed Child. Cursed Child, for those who have read it, there are world building issues, but one thing which it did is it took these characters, they are aged up, okay, and time changes everything, but it like sort of dismantled every single thing. And when I say every single thing, I mean this. I mean every single thing that we liked about them as teenagers, and gave no reason whatsoever as to why it was a plot device. And so when a lot of readers, myself included, and it was marketed as the hidden Harry Potter, eighth Harry Potter book. And I was quite old. I was in my mid-20s at that time, and of course, I went and I got the hardcover immediately. And so we when we read this story, it was such a betrayal. It felt like such a betrayal to these characters that we know. So to answer your question now, to the point, Steve, is once the work of fiction is out in the market, the characters belong to us readers. Their interpretation belong to us readers. They are no longer in the hands of the author. They assume a life of their own, which is formed by the reader of the work. And so when a follow-up work is published, which dismantles that, then this idea of the characters that has been built into our collective consciousness. Of course, everybody has their own minor interpretations, but the larger, broad strokes, when it dismantles those, it really hurts. It really, really hurts. And I think that's where the visceral reaction for me came from. I just gave away Cursed Child, like not even to a used bookstore. I was like, this should be used for scrap. And that's a very, very sad thing for me to say about a book, but I genuinely think it was insulting to the original 7 Harry Potter books. It's like, why? So I do relate to, maybe not the language, I wouldn't say it that way, like, not my Batman, but yeah, that was not Harry Potter. That is not Harry Potter. Okay, now I've ranted freely, please someone else.
No, I agree with Paromita, and I mean, yeah, you can always relativize, and it's just a character. Why do you care? But if we apply that logic to everything, we end up in more of relativism, and why do we care about anything? And I think Paromita's right. There are people that have grown up with these characters. There are people, you talk about the Marvel Universe. There are people that have been reading the comics for God knows how many decades. So they know these characters sometimes even better than the people that have written them. And then now comes Marvel Studios or whatever, and they reinterpret, and they do their interpretation of the character. But it's not true to the law. And I think if something means something to you, you naturally care that it is not what you know. And that doesn't make you wrong, and it doesn't make their interpretation wrong. But if you're trying to sell a product, which is a Marvel movie, your market is the Marvel geeky nerd that knows the thing inside out, and he'll drag everyone else along. But if you piss off that core audience, you're not doing a good job. It's the same with the Rings of Power thing. They hired a Tolkien scholar to help them and to advise them on the project, and they ended up firing him because they didn't like what he said, because they just wanted their version of Middle Earth for the Rings of Power show. So I think people are entitled to care about what they care, and if they don't like what someone that has just arrived has done, it's okay for them to say so.
Adaptations sometimes become law as well. I'm going to tell you a true story. Back when I started writing Weird Gods, I was part of this critique group. So one of the first drafts I showed, I got feedback from a beta reader that is going to be forever seared in my memory. That it was a mistake, telling me that it was a mistake to portray Loki as a father. And didn't I know that Hal was his sister, not his daughter. And this was a group that I thought, would be the right audience for my books because they were Marvel fans, right? Completely backfired. So, some people don't care about the original material at all. They just care about the story. And that becomes the version that, is canon. I'm not saying that it's a majority. I know that was just, minority idiot, I think. I hope. God, I don't know. But just these days I wonder, after all the movies, maybe everyone or the majority of people think that Loki and Thor were brothers. I don't know. But yeah, that happened. So do whatever you want with the story because you're never going to please everyone. Everyone is going to have, it's not about the story. It's the personality of the reader. So some people just cannot fit two different versions of the same story in their heads at all. They read something they like, and it has to be like that. Repetition of the same again. Any deviation would, it's sacrilege. All religions are built on such things, if I may say so. There's a whole book about it, the most read book in the world.
Yeah, back to that the Superman killing Zod question, Steve. I'm wondering who the people were that were raising the biggest outcry. Because Superman's been around for 80 years or whatever it's been, and I find it hard to believe that there's never been a story in all that time where Superman had never either was forced to kill somebody or something, to save billions of lives or millions of lives, whatever. And, so I'm wondering, how many people was just a vocal minority who was outraged, or, that's usually the case on online forums and stuff like that. It's always a vocal minority, but I'm kind of curious about that because I think most people weren't that affected by it. They just enjoyed the movie for what it was, and and there was a lot of. I thought the scene was okay. I thought it was well done. There was a lot of anguish and a lot of emotion involved in the scene and stuff like that, and it didn't bother me. I've been reading comics for 50 years, so
yeah.
It's
well, like in BVS when Batman uses a gun, he uses the whatever gun shot, and it's like Batman would never use a gun.
Yeah, I heard that one too. Yeah, he'd never use a gun.
Just don't watch it then. If it offends you that much, just don't watch it. Just skip them. I don't know.
No, I agree with that part, Steve. That we should not. I mean, that is what I did. I distanced myself from the franchise, and I won't continue. But I completely agree that we should not, spew hatred or vitriol in any manner towards anyone who is trying to create art, even if it is a version of art that we don't agree with. But sometimes it hurts. I'm so sad that nobody on the panel took this opportunity to mention Daenerys Targaryen and who better than Bran.
Oh.
We try not to think about it.
Yeah, we try to.
Yeah, I'm trying to block that out.
I'm trying to scrub it from memory.
Yeah. Forget.
How successful was blocking?
Oh, man.
Paromita, I am reading Dance of the Dragons. I am rereading Dance of the Dragons now, very slowly, just enjoying.
Yes.
And I'm just. It makes me. I have to read slowly because it makes me so angry. So many missed opportunities, man, on so many levels. It's how, why? It's just,
Let's see if I can catch up to you.
Moving on.
Oh, I know it's getting late for some of you all around the world, but it was fun. It's always fun. So thanks everyone for hanging out and coming by and talking about Batman killing people and all kinds of fun stuff. And
And Cursed Child is not good.
Yeah.
Take it from
Wheel of Time. Yeah. Song of Ice and Fire. Mythology.
You guys keep bringing it up when I'm here, and it's just you're all in it.
It's a conspiracy. Let's get him. Yeah. So in the meantime, Susana, where can people find you?
Everywhere. If you Google my name, you'll find me. But I'm mostly hanging around on Page Chewing Forum or Twitter as Chronodendron.
Still hanging on, huh?
Still, yeah, persevering.
Yeah. And Paromita.
the best place to find me is the Page Chewing forums. I'm there almost every day. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. And Jose.
Yeah, I can be found on the Jose's Amazing Worlds YouTube channel and on the Page Chewing forums. Thank you.
Yes. And Jarrod.
Yes, I see Paromita on the Page Chewing forum every day, and
Confirmed.
I'm there too. I'm mostly watching, but I'm also have my YouTube channel, The Fantasy Thinker, and so you can contact me through those many means.
Awesome. Thanks again so much. I'm glad we made it. Sorry about last week. It was weird having a Friday without visiting with all of you, so it's good to be back.
Well, thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah,
It's always fun.
anytime. So we'll see everyone next week. We'll figure something out, what our topic will be. You
Yeah.
bet, man. Maybe we'll figure it out. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.